After 1 year of living completely off-grid, I wanted to share the real story of how we got here. We're not your typical off-grid homestead. We wanted to build slowly, stay comfortable, and avoid the overwhelm that stops many people in their tracks before they even get started. I recently ran a poll and asked you on YouTube on one of my posts, what's the main reason stopping you from going off-grid? And here's what you said. 73% said the upfront cost and complexity. 15% said the fear of losing modern comforts. And 12% said not knowing where to start. So in this video, I'll show you how we addressed some of those exact challenges and concerns, and hopefully help you develop a smoother glide path to off-grid independence. But before we jump in, here's the reasons why we went off-grid and why we built the way we did. Energy independence, reliable power through storms and outages, protection from EMPs, disasters, and grid instability in general, and freedom from rising energy costs. You have no control over what your utility company is going to do in terms of rate hikes. Out here, the grid goes down fairly often for one reason or another. We're kind of in a remote area, and it could be lightning, which happened recently. It could be severe storms. It could also be a purposeful de-energizing of the system to prevent the possibility of wildfires. They do that when the winds are really high and we're in very dry conditions. They do warn us ahead of time, but sometimes the power will be out for 12 to 15 or more hours. And frankly, I got tired of relying on a system that I had no control over. Now, we didn't go small, we went big. And there's a reason why we oversized our system. We were a little spoiled living in the city with endless power. You turn on a switch, you run everything in your home whenever you want to. You never have to worry about running out of power. So when we went off grid, we wanted that same luxury of endless power. So we really never worry about our power. We do not count kilowatts. We run everything all the time, air conditioners, hot tub, sauna, you name it. We've got a surplus of power usually. And these days we're actually purposefully trying to run down the power so that we cycle our batteries more deeply, which I think is better for long-term battery health. If you want to learn more about this system, I've got 3 videos. One on how much we paid for it, one on all the different components that make up the system, and another on the ground mount rack. I'll leave those videos in the description below. We also wanted to offset the long-term loss of efficiency of the panels, which happens as panels age over time. So we've got plenty of extra power right now. Over many years, that will diminish a little bit, but that's okay because we have a lot more than we need. And the third main reason why we went so big is to have plenty of stored energy through a multi-day storm. So if it gets really cloudy, a big snowstorm come in, big rain event, for example, we don't really need to worry about running out of power. Now, we will be more mindful of our energy use in those conditions if we can see a big storm coming in, but that really doesn't happen very often here in Utah. We'll get a big storm, it'll come in, it'll blow out, we'll have sun again. And we have lots of sun in this part of the world. Another question I get fairly frequently in the comments is, why are you still connected to the grid? Why would you spend all this money if you have grid power right there? And we got lucky with this piece of land. There were power lines running right between this land and the next parcel, which we ended up buying, but it goes up to the utility towers up there, and they had to run those wires to power those towers. And so we were just able to tap in very, very close by and not have to trench very far to bring power over. So why do we keep that and not just sever those ties? Simple. If anything fails in our solar power system, I can just flip that big switch on the wall and just turn the grid power on. And that way we can have continuity of power while we're repairing our system. Solar power systems are very reliable these days, but they're not completely devoid of any risk of failure. So you have to build in some sort of a contingency. We don't have a generator yet. I need a generator for that very reason. If we're in a grid down situation and we have an issue where it's a big storm comes in, or we have a problem with our solar array and we need to make repairs, we could run the generator in the meantime. The generator's always there to top off your batteries if you have a problem with your array. So it's definitely a redundancy that we're going to put in place. We just don't have it yet. But what we do have right now, and because we're in normal civility and society's running beautifully, more or less, we can just turn the grid on. It's a nice feature to have. Why would you sever that? Certainly not over principle, just because we don't want to have any tie to the modern society or civilization or the power company. That's kind of ridiculous. If it's there, why not utilize it? Now, we do have a very small $15 connection fee that we pay for the privilege of maintaining a relationship with a power company. That's okay. We can afford $15 a month. It's not going to wipe us out. I'd like to point out that just because I have a line running over to that pole doesn't mean I'm using it, and I'm certainly not dependent on that power. So we are completely energy independent, but we have a redundant backup just in case we decide we want to use it for some reason. Our power company does not have net metering, so we're not able to sell back all of our excess surplus of power. And because we don't backfeed into the system, there's no risk to linemen. So if the power goes down and they're working on the line, they're not going to get electrocuted from the power coming from our solar array. I don't have any scientific data to support this, but I believe that most people are not wanting to go off grid just to save energy. I think you're going off grid to insulate yourself from the potential chaos of being in the middle of a large urban area with a massive population that's completely unprepared for any type of mishap with the energy grid. If you found this channel, you're probably a lot like me. You're looking for a way to not only survive a potential societal breakdown, but to thrive through it. And by thriving, I don't mean running into the mountains and giving up all your modern conveniences for the security of being away from the city. That's ridiculous. And that's no way to live. Instead, I mean strategically relocating, getting out of the city, getting back out into nature, being surrounded by natural resources, insulated from potential chaos, and living life more independently and certainly on your own terms. So if you fall into that category that's worried about losing modern conveniences, there's no reason to worry about that because we've got power, we've got Starlink. I can do Teams virtual meetings for up to 2 hours, like a board meeting, for example. No glitches, it doesn't buffer. We stream movies. I've got ChatGPT. I can go online for hours and hours. It's pretty much uninterrupted, direct connectivity to modern civilization. You're just not in the thick of the city with all the vulnerabilities of being around people that are completely unprepared. And if something goes down and you're in the middle of that, that's where the trouble really starts. So here's what I've learned reflecting back on the decade of planning it took to finally get here comfortably off-grid. For me, it started years ago. I was noticing a shift, people becoming more divided than ever. Politics wasn't just something people were debating anymore. It became personal, emotional, even hostile. Friends that I'd known for decades began cutting ties over the differences that would have ended normally with a handshake or even a laugh. So right around that same time, I'm running my security businesses and I'm deep in the world of threat analysis, violent crime statistics, situational awareness. And I started to notice spikes in crime, policing being defunded, and just a general sense that things were trending in a more unstable direction. Now, I'm not here to rant about politics or conspiracy theories. That's not what this channel is about. But I can tell you that when you dive deeper into these trends, you're going to notice that being completely immersed in large urban environments is a liability. So somewhere around 2015, I decided I would start developing an exit plan. And this took a lot of time, energy, and research, spending hours looking on land.com in various states, looking for areas that were somewhat remote but not completely isolated, where we thought we could still find local services, farms, plenty of water, lots of abundant sun for our solar. And we ended up settling on areas around southern Utah, and that narrowed our search down. And then eventually we found this place. Now, real quick, I read every single comment. So let me know below how you're considering getting out of the city, or if you have already, how did you do it? So once I finally made the decision to get out of the city, I broke it into steps. Otherwise, it's just too overwhelming. So I think a logical first step is to figure out what state you're going to be in. You need to get out, start traveling, exploring. We fell in love with this place. It was a pretty easy decision. Once we came here and looked around and started exploring the local government policies, farmland, water rights, availability of other resources, became pretty clear. This was it. I think if you're not really sure where you're going to go, you can't really plan building an off-grid homestead. So find a location first. One of the things while you're searching for land, make sure that property taxes aren't exorbitant, because when you buy raw land, you might be sitting on it for quite some time as you're planning and long before you actually build anything. your property taxes should be somewhat low for raw land. So the next logical step once you acquire your land is to figure out how you're going to finance the build of your homestead. When you first start to build your homestead, it's like climbing a mountain with no map. There's a million ways you could go, and there's no one-size-fits-all plan. You just start with the essentials, really. Access, of course, shelter, power, and water. As much as I wanted to build this completely off-grid right from the get-go, we realized that we had a budget and it wasn't going to go far enough for us to build a luxury home and all of the amenities that we wanted, plus doing the major excavation it took to get this barn and this solar array built into the side of this mountain. We don't have a lot of flat area up here, and at the time we were building, we only had this initial 20 acres. Now we have 106 and we've got some flat land down below. Who knows how we would have done it if we had known that was all going to happen, but we had to deal with what we had at the time, and that was 20 acres on fairly steep terrain. There really just wasn't any place to build a solar array that would be above the trees and not have a lot of shadows. And so we said, fine, we'll just build it with a grid connection, and then later we'll plan everything that we want on the barn and the solar array, which was a big, expensive project. So to go to a completely off-grid homestead like this, it's not something you're gonna do overnight. This takes a lot of planning and a lot of patience. So for us, phase 2 came 5 long years later, and that all happened right around 2024. So here, as I sit in October of 2025, it's actually November 1st today. It's been 5 years. It's been 5 years since we built the house, and now, finally, 1 year later, reflecting back on cutting the tether and going completely off-grid. So it's been a process. One of the things to consider when you're building is if you're financing, you're going to have insurance. Banks and insurance companies are not real big on completely off-grid homesteads. So up here, we've got well water and septic. That's very normal for this area because there's no mass infrastructure running through this area. But to go off-grid and to have solar, it can raise some eyebrows. So by tying to the grid during the construction loan process, which converted to a mortgage, and getting insurance, which you have to have, if you're gonna build a house like this, the bank's gonna demand that you have insurance. It's a lot easier when you're connected to the grid. Another thing to consider is your water. For us here in Utah, we have a system of water rights that's required for you to be able to tap into the aquifer. You can't just drill a well and start sucking water out of the ground without a legal framework in place. So when we purchased this land, it came with water rights. When we bought the adjacent properties, they had water rights too. So now we have lots of redundancy. We have 3 separate wells and lots of water rights so we can legally pull water out of the ground for farming and for our household use, and all of that's completely above board and legal. Now, water rights are not free, so it's something that you have to roll into the price and consider in your financial planning. So our phase 2 tied in with the end of phase 1, which was paying off the mortgage here. I sold a business and I was able to do that. And phase 2 was completely self-financed. So building the barn and the solar array was not an inexpensive thing to do. Again, patience. It takes lots of patience to wait it out, to make your plan come to fruition. Being really frugal and counting every penny and saving and the whole thing, you've really got to be committed to this to make it happen. Now, speaking of frugal, when it comes to using energy, we're not frugal at all. We burn power like there's no tomorrow. And the reason is because we have a large capacity system and we produce way more power than we're actually using. In fact, we're looking for ways to increase consumption so that we cycle our batteries a little bit more deeply, which I think is better for lithium-ion batteries, to cycle them a little bit more further down, so getting below 50% state of charge and letting the sun charge it back up is a little bit better way instead of having your batteries always almost topped off. So we put a heater in the barn, which means we don't have to winterize our RV, and we also keep our lithium-ion batteries nice and cozy warm all winter long. We have very heavy insulation in the barn, so that heater doesn't run very often, and it is fully electric, so we're kind of pulling from the batteries to run that heater during the winter. But if we switch from our conventional furnace and AC condensers to a high-efficiency heat pump system, in the future, we'll be using a lot more electricity. We'll also switch our water heater from gas to electricity. Adding more electrical appliances to utilize our abundance of power is something we do plan to do in the future. As I mentioned earlier, another reason why we have a lot of extra power is because the panels themselves will diminish in efficiency over time, and we want to be able to have an offset for that. So as they lose efficiency, we've still got more power than we need. So we've got many years of a slow decline in efficiency built into our planning. And we are on propane here. So the big truck comes up here and fills up our big propane tank, and that's what we're cooking on. We're heating our water with propane. We're also have a fireplace that's propane, and our heating comes from our propane. So in the future, to help reduce the risk of any kind of supply breakdown that would interrupt our propane service, we are going to be switching to electric heating, maybe electric cooking. We really are stuck on loving gas cooking right now, but we may go to an electric stovetop. And I also plan to put a 2,000-gallon underground propane tank here so that when they do fill it up, if for any reason there's a breakdown in supply chain, hopefully it would come back eventually, but we would have a real surplus of gas underground to help bridge the gap until we could get propane back up here again. We also have a wood stove that we've got in the barn that's brand new with all of the piping and everything we would need to vent that out through a chimney through the roof. And we're not installing that. We just have it as a contingency, as a backup plan in case we ever got in a situation where we didn't have gas to heat the home. We've got tons of wood around here, and we could install that wood stove and keep ourselves warm during the winter. We could also cook on that because it does have a cooking surface on the top of the stove. Another thing to consider when you're searching for where your off-grid homestead's going to be is how much sun do you get on that land? How much shading is there? Is there a place where you can build a solar array that's going to get sun most of the day and all throughout the year? For us, we've got abundant sun here in southern Utah, and we also have these short little juniper trees. So this land is well treed, but these trees really don't get much more than about 20 or 30 feet tall. So when we built that solar terrace over there, we were able to elevate our panels above the trees. So the trees aren't tall enough to get above the solar panels and cast a shadow across them, which would diminish the efficiency of the system. And so that's something to consider. If you're looking at an area that's got tall trees, how are you going to keep your solar array absorbing sun all day long? One of the redundancy pieces that I have not put into place yet is our generator. So again, I do plan to put a 2,000-gallon underground tank to supply the home for gas, and that would bridge a very long supply chain breakdown if something like that happened. We would also have a separate 500-gallon dedicated tank for the generator. So right now, if something goes wrong with the solar, I've got the grid to back up. And if something goes wrong with the grid and we have a multi-day storm and our batteries get low, the generator would kick on and recharge the batteries. So again, redundancies on top of redundancies. And a nice thing about propane is that it has almost an infinite shelf life. It can sit in that tank for years and years and years and not diminish in potency, and it won't go bad. So 1 year being completely off-grid, was it worth it? Absolutely. This is not about running off to the mountains and prepping for doomsday. This is about having complete energy independence, being surrounded by natural resources. So if there's any type of a hiccup or a problem or a war or a societal breakdown, we're insulated enough to where we could have a very localized community of folks that we rely on for anything that we can't produce here on our off-grid homestead ourselves. So yes, we're completely off-grid now, but we still have vulnerabilities. We're not completely immune from potential disaster, but these are things that we are learning and developing new strategies to work around. But it's still a lot less vulnerable than we were living in a large urban area, densely populated, full of millions of people that have absolutely no plan, no stored food, no stored water. And if something goes down that's going to really disrupt society, they're going to be desperate and they're going to be coming to you looking for what you've worked so hard to build and amass. And I'm just not willing to do that anymore. So out here, we're not worried about the next power outage. We're not worried about a potential supply chain breakdown like we had during the pandemic. And we're just out here living, just enjoying life, and a lot less worry and a lot less concern. and it's a very good lifestyle. So if you're planning to go completely off-grid, here's my biggest advice. Plan slowly, deliberately, and build systems that are redundant and simple, things that you can work on and repair yourself, and then you can just relax and not worry about what's going on in the news cycle. You just live. A year off grid has changed the way that I see everything. I'm no longer intimidated by it. I've had some disasters that I was not completely prepared for, but it taught me to be better prepared, to think more through some of the things that could go wrong, have spare parts, and then you just work through it and you survive and you learn and you get better at this. And now things are pretty relaxed. You know, things get a rhythm, a new rhythm, an off-grid rhythm that you didn't have before and that you're probably scared and maybe a little bit intimidated by, but you will get there. And the only way to do it is to get out here and just start living this way. One of the purposes of this channel is to build a community of like-minded people that want to cut the tether and go off-grid, but still have all the modern conveniences of living in a completely connected urban life. I'm here to show you that it is possible and it's a pretty damn good life. So if you're planning on going completely off-grid, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear some of your plans, and I try to read every single comment and answer as many as I can. So let's keep the conversation going down below, and I'll see you on the next video.